hear me. Thanks very much for joining us for today's TCF v2.0 in practice webinar for publishers. My name is Philip. I'm the legal director at IAB Europe and lead the policies working group within the TCF steering group. So this webinar is the second actually in a series that is dedicated to publishers looking to successfully switch over to TCF version 2.0 in the coming months. As many of you know, IAB Europe has, in partnership with IAB Tech Lab, announced in August of last year the launch of the second iteration of the Transparency and Consent Framework, or the TCF v2.0. And following that launch over the last year, vendors and CMPs that implemented TCF v1 have been working hard to implement the new technical specifications and policy requirements, something that, as you also know, everyone is due to complete by the 15th of August in about 2 months' time, which, as you likely know, is the switch over date for TCF towards TCF v2.0. So a couple of general remarks. As you may know, TCF, like TCF version 1, TCF v2 uses standardization to support the overall drive to increase consumer transparency and choice, and to improve the management of consent and compliance by digital properties, as well as to enhance industry collaboration and information sharing for its purposes. However, TCF v2 is also a better and improved tool in many ways, and it takes much better account of publisher needs as well as evolving legal requirements and expectations from regulators. So for instance, under TCF version 2, publishers have greater control and flexibility with respect to how they integrate and collaborate with their technology partners through, for instance, functionalities such as the ability to impose restrictions on data processing purposes, as well as on the who their ad tech partners are. So against this background, today's webinar is dedicated to providing real-life examples of validated CMPs under TCF version 2. And hopefully this can help publishers looking to successfully switch over to TCF version 2 in the coming months. So to do this, we've invited several speakers from organizations that operate 3 prominent consent management platforms on the market, including, as you can see here on the slide, Nandi Gurprasad and Robin Bonduel from Overreach, Romain Gauthier from Didomi, as well as Gergana Kirovska from LiveRamp. I would note before we begin that this session is recorded and that there will be a Q&A at the end of the webinar, and that if you have any questions, I would encourage you to enter them, as you're probably already used to using these tools anyway, but to enter them in the question box, which can be found at the bottom of the webinar tool. So now, before we dive in with these 3 CMPs, what I'll first do is hand over to my colleague Patrick Verdon, who is our technical director at IAB Europe, and who will give a brief overview of our CMP compliance and enforcement program. So Patrick, over to you.
That's great. Thank you very much, Philip. So hi, everyone. What I'm going to be doing is giving you a quick overview of our CMP compliance program. So if we move to the next slide. Okay, so looking at TCF version 1 in summary, so we launched our CMP compliance program about a year ago now in June 2019. And as a result of that process, we validated 134 CMPs against TCF version 1. Now, in order to conduct the program, we do this by using a tool called the CMP Validator. And this is a tool that we built at IAB Europe, which is a Chrome browser extension. And that means it can run in the browser, and therefore it can run on any website. So as publishers, you're very welcome to actually use the tool yourselves. You can request access to the tool, and then you can actually check your implementation against the TCF policies yourselves by employing the CMP validator. So feel free to get in touch to do that. Now, as part of the version 1 compliance process, we also reviewed top sites by traffic in key markets. And where we found breaches of the TCF policies, we've issued suspension warnings to CMPs in those cases. And it's worth pointing out that in TCF version 1, there was no limit to the number of suspension warnings for a CMP. We'd issue a warning, we'd give 14 days to fix the issues, and providing the issues were fixed in that period, there would be no further action. Okay? All right, so if we move to the next slide, let's have a look at the process for TCF version 2. So for TCF version 2 compliance and enforcement, we've now validated over 40 CMPs so far, which is great. We've got about 34 commercial CMPs, 9 mobile or in-app CMPs, and 4 private CMPs, okay? And as part of the process, we will continue to monitor top sites by traffic in key markets. And in doing so, we've actually seen early adopters of version 2 CMPs, which is great news and very exciting to already see some CMPs in the wild running version 2. Now, having said that, we've also observed in a few cases some non-compliant version 2 CMPs. And this is actually for CMPs who have only just completed the validation process. So this was a bit of a concern for us. And so, you know, it's a concern because obviously CMPs that breach the TCF policies ultimately undermine the TCF, and this exposes all parties to legal risk. So what we've done in this case, we've revised the enforcement process, and we now have a limit of 3 suspension warnings for a CMP within a 12-month period. If there's a cause for a 4th warning to be issued, that will result in the immediate suspension of the CMP for a minimum of 14 days. So hopefully this will serve as an important deterrent to avoid these kinds of breaches in the wild. And you know, looking at this from a publisher perspective, it's really important to consider the initial layer requirements of the TCF, because those initial layer requirements in the CMP are their TCF policies, yes, but they're ultimately derived from the GDPR. And in some cases, CMPs allow you as a publisher to change the text, that first layer text. So please be aware that if you change it significantly, you may well therefore be breaching GDPR. And so if you make significant changes to that text, then we would suggest you get that text validated by the CMP or indeed by ourselves. You can contact us at IAB Europe to do that as well. Okay, and that's it in a nutshell. So hopefully that gives you a good overview of our compliance program. So now I'll hand over to Overreach, who will provide a demo of their service.
Thank you, Patrick. So over to Nandi and Robin from Overreach. Please go ahead.
Hello, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Good afternoon, everyone. Pleasure to be here with you. Thanks, IAB, for organizing this vital session. My name is Nandi Gurprasad. I head up strategic partnerships and go-to-market at Overreach. I'm joined by Robin Bonduel, and we've split this up in 2 parts, so you're not tired of my voice after 10 minutes. I'll give you a quick intro of Overreach, show you a bit our choice manager CPMP, and then talk a bit in terms of the challenges and the benefits of TCF2, and then hand over to Robin. So a bit about Overreach. When we started 6 years ago, the founders realized that to need data to understand the users and engage with them effectively, we need to get their consent. And most of the industry thought we were crazy, because we had about a 50% opt-in rate, while the entire market was blatantly borrowing 100% of users' data without them knowing it. 4 years later, in 2018, GDPR came in and validated our position. And today, our mission is to establish a trusted digital advertising ecosystem driven by user choice. And I'll come to that a bit more, because what we've done is put the user first, said, look, nothing happens unless, 1, we give the user choice, 2, we get the consent that's needed to do, you know, personalized or targeted ads. And this also satisfies both ends of the market, from the advertiser side as well as the publisher side. So since 2014, we've now grown to 4,000 employees in about 10 different countries, working with more than 10,000 apps and 1,500 of the global brands worldwide, the likes of Samsung, Nike, Rolex, LG, and others. A quick glimpse of the numbers in terms of the performance we're able to deliver at scale. As you can see, we're a global player, and again, we work with both publishers and advertisers, and there we fully understand the need. And look at the Overreach sitting in the middle of the end user, the advertiser, and the publisher is one way to view Overreach as a business or approach to the ecosystem, if you will. From our conversations with thousands of publishers, what we hear are two consistent things and two resounding needs. One is we need better monetization. What does this mean? High CPMs, premium brand ads, improved ad quality. And secondly, we need to be compliant with tighter regulation. We need consent for the data. If we use any data, we need the consent for the partners and the purposes to be able to support premium ads, which supports our business. Oops, sorry. Moving on to the next slide. So there's plenty of problems and challenges out there, and new publishers probably are aware and understand a lot of this. And if you take a look at some of the screens here and a study run by Cornell University, many of the CPMP implementations are falling short. And this means it's challenging times for publishers. Not only have you got tighter regulation, the challenge with the DIY solutions and dealing with things like TCF2 and other regulation coming about, such as CCCPA, and then the country-specific regulations such as CNIL in France or the ICO here in the UK. You know, you just cannot rely on legitimate interest alone. So let me introduce you to Overreach Choice Manager, the only consent and preference management platform that has a history of 6 years of compliance and business results. And we have a lot of skin in this game because we, one, needed to protect our own ad business, so I'll be completely open there, but which means that, you know, publishers need proper consent. They need to be compliant to be able to serve personalized ads. And even a lot of the big advertisers and brands we work with, they also ask for that. Look, you know, have you got the, you know, consent from the user to be able to, you know, for us to be able to target them better, to ensure that we're targeting the right audience. So it's critical that within the ecosystem that everybody plays in a fully compliant manner, and we're seeing that more and more, and I'm sure you are, the publishers. So quickly about Overreach's Choice Manager. We're fully TCF2 compliant, but we also operate on a global basis. We use GDPR as the base level, and in terms of ensuring that you're compliant, not only with GDPR, but CCPA as well as CNIL. We provide a clear consent notice, agree, disagree buttons, easy for the users to see, to be able to make their choices, the purposes listed and described, and also the full list of partners. And we go beyond the IAB vendor list of 520 partners or so. We also include the likes of Facebook in there. We'll come more to the actual interface, etc. But what we've done as well is added features that, one, stays within our mission of providing the user with choice. And one of these key features, which has actually helped increase opt-in rate and acceptance rate massively up to 75%. And it's also managed to deliver user trust. And for you publishers, it's high monetization, which is called a fair choice. So the user gets 3 options. 1, share data and receive relevant ads. 2, don't share data, but you'll receive less relevant ads. And thirdly, pay a fair price for an ad-free and data collection-free experience. Another feature that we provide is the ability for you to optimize your consent rate. As you know, optimizing the consent rate will help you sustain your revenue growth. And we've actually built in a lot of experience and a lot of tech into this in terms of algorithms to customize color, layout, frequency, to help you drive high acceptance rates. We also provide intelligent incremental consent notices. We also give you the ability to customize your consent notice whenever you want. And you'll see this when Robin presents the dashboard to you in terms of the TCF2 version in practice. And any updates you make will actually go live in real time, so you don't need to update an SDK or worry about that. And in terms of getting you ready for TCF2, look, it's been a lot for you publishers to deal with. I mean, CNIL, CCPA, COVID, but the benefits far outweigh the challenges and effort. There's much more granularity and choice for users. However, it is complex, dealing with consent strings, ensuring these strings get passed to your partners, dealing with purposes and partners, and the stack approach that the IAB have nicely come up with. Our recommendation is don't try this yourselves, focus on your core business. And one thing I really want to add is consider of the IAB to extend to the deadline to August 15th, because it does take some time and effort. And to sum up about Overreach Choice Manager, look, we'll give you proven compliance, get you GDPR compliant, CCPA ready. We've been proven for over 6 years. We've been doing this a long time. We've been giving users opt-in and a consent notice for over 6 years. And we have been proven to deliver the business results that you need to run your business and to grow your business, including monetization. So that's Augury and our choice manager in a nutshell. I'll hand you over to Robin now, our VP of our product. I'll stop sharing. Thank you for your time.
All right, sorry, I was mute. I'm very glad to be here today. I will give you a quick demo of our tool, and thanks to the IAB for hosting the webinar. So I will first show you a live implementation of the consent notice to let you see how we streamline the end user experience on both web and apps. Then show you quickly how you can create such a notice for your own digital assets, website, or apps. So place for the demo. Here is the Augury Choice Manager's consent notice on our own marketing website. What you can see here is we try to combine the information and control that are needed to make a valid choice for the end user with a straightforward user experience. User can globally accept or decline, but they can also easily edit their preferences with more details, more granularity. For instance, selecting purpose. Not how we integrated the legitimate interest objection. So for instance, if you go in this purpose, you can accept or remove the legitimate interest. Users can also have a look at the vendors and they can get even more control and knowledge on what is doing any vendor. Last thing that I wanted to show you on this consent notice is the non-IAB vendor lists. For sure, Augury actively pushes the industry to move to the TCF, but when a given vendor didn't register yet, we know it's a blocker for you guys, and our CPMP still lets you collect and process consent for these players. So this is it for the consent notice. So now that I've shown you the standard configuration, of course, I want to let you know that Augury Choice Manager comes with a bunch of customization that I will now showcase. So let's see how you can implement the consent notice on your side. For this, I will go in the Augury dashboard. And first thing here, we need to create a new asset. So you will need to add your asset. So let's say in my example that I create an Android app for, let's say, and I add the financial time. So financial times app. You see it's super easy. I register the asset. This is something that you would not see. It's because I'm in the Augury demo account involving monetization product. So let's accept. And then it's super simple. You can integrate the SDK. So you will access the documentation. And when everything is done, you come back to the dashboard and you are able now to edit the consent settings. So let's click here. Sorry, I just need to refresh. And note that here is the central place where you will be able to address most of the configuration of your assets. You will be here on the right, you will see the live preview on the right panel. And this lets you see your changes in real time. This is very helpful. You can also display it for a given configuration. So for instance, you can display for a given language. But you can also see TCF v1 version and TCF v2 version, which is helpful if you are a publisher already working with us and transitioning from the v1 to the v2. So let's say that in my example, I want to customize a bit this consent notice. So then what you can see here is the preview. I will add a logo. So let's add first a logo. Then I will deactivate the layout, the dynamic creative optimization, to take control of the layout. And what you will see here is I can select some colors. So let's say I want to turn it to black so that it better reflects my layout chart. I can play with radius and stuff like this. There are a lot of other configurations, change of text, and so on, that you can control outside of the dashboard thanks to support. I won't be able to cover all of them today for sure. I won't be able to cover all the settings as well, but let us know if you need a demo, and we'll be happy to discuss with you guys. Once the layout is configured, the next part is about the consent rules. So in the consent, you can select the area where you will push the consent notice. You can also configure your stacks and purpose. So you have choice between the default configuration, but you can also select, and with a fancy system of drag and drop, you can exactly show and get consent for what you need to the end users. And then you can set the reminders to remind your users about the consent notice when they didn't give their consent, or when the notice or the vendor list updates. And finally, you can set consent for yourself. For instance, here, you can push your name, your policy links, select your purpose, and then you will start collecting consent for your own purpose. When you are happy with the configuration, it's time to save and deploy. So you've seen like 5 minutes, very quick implementation. Note that whatever you are on web or on app, you will be able to edit and deploy your consent notice without reintegrating any tag or SDK. This is very valuable for you. It pushes directly. And last but not least, I want to show you the monitoring. So when your asset is configured, you can easily monitor the performance of Overreach Choice Manager. You have a bunch of dimensions, so country, device type, and asset, and you also have other information on impressions and users. Our product is self-served, so don't hesitate to register, to have a look, to see if it might fit your needs. You can for sure visit our help center to get more information on all the different sections. And I would be happy to be in touch with you in the future, guys. So this is it for me, and thanks again to the IAB.
Okay, thanks very much. So we would hand over now to Romain from Didomi, who is the founder of Didomi. Romain, you should have the screen.
Yes. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Romain Gauthier. I'm co-founder and CEO of Didomi. And today I'm going to introduce you to what we've learned together with our clients, publisher clients, about the TCF v2 transition. It's a big shift, an important change for a lot of you. So we know that you have a lot of answers of questions that are very often not answered. So let's try to focus on that today. Very briefly, at Didomi, and to start with, we are a consent management platform that has been there for a while. One like specific aspect of Didomi is that we only focus on consent and preference management. So we don't do anything else. We have a paid solution. So it means that with us, you have the absolute neutral solution that serves exactly your interests. We don't take any interest, or we don't have any vested interest in your monetization. We are just there to make sure your consent works well and correctly integrates with every monetization stack that you may choose today or in the future. So we have basically 3 jobs that we accomplish for you. We help you collect and help your users access consents at any time and in any environment that you'd like to support as a publisher. We help you store these consent events so that you have a formal proof of it if you're ever controlled by any data protection authority. We also help you understand exactly what type of behaviors your users have with respect to consent questions, and also provide you with optimization tools that can help you make your consent rates better and therefore drive your monetization up. And finally, last but not least, we help you distribute consents that you have collected to any vendors that you may choose. Of course, we integrate with all TCF vendors, but we also have learned from the very early days that as a publisher, you always have custom vendors or vendors that are like very specific to you, not part of the framework, local, etc., for which you may also want to collect consent and have a way to transmit and distribute them this consent. And we also support all these type of use cases. So we've scaled a bit over the years. Right now, Didomi is a solution that is like fully scaled, both on web and mobile. And so you can just like go and look by yourself on a number of websites for live implementations, test them yourself, play with the UI. And I always think it's the best proof of any product asking for a live implementation. So as you'll see, we work with a lot of websites, a lot of very large and premium publishers in a lot of countries, in mostly European countries, but we also have some key clients in the US, in Canada, and we are very proud about our clients. We have like satisfied clients. You can also ask for reference if you're interested. That's it about Didomi. Let's move to what I think is going to be more relevant for you today, is what we learned with our publishers about TCF v2 transition and the best practices that we can take out of these early weeks. First, and I think that's a problem that surfaces all the time, almost for a publisher. It's the issue of localizing the consent UX as a publisher. Typically, even like premium publishers have mostly local audiences and really wants to take the most out of what the regulatory framework allows them to do. And so that's something you need to work on as a publisher to ensure that you're correctly familiarized with what your data protection officers ask from you, and therefore also correctly set up the consent UX to fit these requirements. This leaves you some room for like customization and adapting the UX to local needs. And one thing where we see a lot of requests for expertise is how do I fit that with the V2 policies so that I'm still compliant with V2 policies. And that's where like Didomi tools and support can also assist you figuring out what exact setup will work well on your local markets. Second thing that we are seeing over and over is this idea that with V2 comes a number of new questions, and for which, as a publisher, you don't have an answer. And so I think the best way to figure out the answer is to test. Testing is not only testing the UI to like what color should I use for my buttons. It's we think it's much deeper than that. It's also testing the performance, testing the validity of your consent strings. It's always surprising to find out how much of your consent strings are actually received and usable by your vendors, and that's where we've developed a lot of expertise as well to ensure the way you integrate Didomi within a page, within the mobile application, maximizes also your performance and your ability to usefully collect consent strings from your users. We support a number of A/B tests that you can run. Basically, any features that we offer you within the Didomi CMP can be A/B tested. So not only the buttons, the UI, the CSS, but also the text, the format, the consent mode, if that's okay on your market. Everything is there to be tested, and we only believe in tests and data-driven decisions. one key learnings that we are also seeing is a lot of publishers also have cross-platform implementation issues. So it's not only about web consent or about in-app consent. There are a number of other environments where you find yourself in need of a consent collection solution. And so we are also seeing a number of questions arising from specific environments such as AMP, where like the environment is much more constrained and where like the choices therefore are reduced from a publisher standpoint, so you can't do as much as you would like in this type of environments. And so we think that's the role of the CMP to adequately guide you within these specific environments. Of course, like web and mobile environments are not the only ones where we see consent questions surfacing. We are live on connected televisions. That's for the exotic part of our job, and we are also releasing a Unity SDK that will help you collect consent within games if you're a gaming and developer. For the rest, a bunch of best practices that we see, but we prefer to share with you. Like we see that moving to V2 is something that should not be changed. So you can't switch back to V1. So let's make sure that the day you pull the trigger, you're fully ready, because it's a number of complications come from like trying to move backwards with the transition. So we are there to also help you find out the right setup prior to pulling the trigger. One thing that publishers also underestimate is that when you will launch V2, you will recollect consents for all your the new purposes, and so that's like a brand new consent base that you'll work on, and that's something that you have to bear in mind when you make the transition, because it can also have impacts on your revenue. Like obviously V1 and V2 cannot be used in parallel, so it's one or the other, and after August 15th it will be V2. So that's also something that when getting ready for your transition, you need to make sure every team understands as well, not only like the dev team but also like your monetization team that need to be aware of that. One thing that we also find neglected, yet very powerful for publishers, are all the publisher restrictions. So it's a brand new set of options that are provided by the version 2 of the framework that you should take advantage of, because they can really help you figure out the best setup to protect your business and your audience, and ensure that you're in full control over your supply chain that provides you with revenue. That's it for the best practice. Let's move to the demo. So I'll jump on the demo part. So Didomi is like a CMP that provides you with a lot of tools and support to guide you through the implementation of your consent collection process. The first tool that we make available is an automated compliance report that you can systematically apply to your websites, where you can really learn very quickly what is going well and not well in terms of compliance on this given website. It's also a tool that is very useful to adequately map who are your vendors, who is actually deploying tags, dropping cookies on your website, and you can instantly learn that from this report. From there, our role is to make it very easy for you to create and deploy a consent notice. So what a consent notice for us is a way to collect consent from your users online. So it can be deployed on the website, on the mobile application, on an AMP website, and really then the process is just about configuring the exact notice that is working for you. So here I've worked on a demo notice that you can see all the time in the preview of the platform that is there. So I've really played a bit with the notice already, but it's just to show you that at any point in time you can really look at ways at how it like your configuration impacts the visual, the front end aspect of the notice. There are a number of other things behind the notice, a lot of complications. Where should it be targeted to? Is it one domain? Is it like a number of domains, etc.? I won't go into details. Then we offer you a number of choices about the format, obviously the layouts as well as the text. So everything is configurable. Obviously, these things can have an impact on your V2 compliance. So if you happen to change the original text, we ask you for we will review your notice prior to publishing it to ensure you're fully compliant with V2. And then I think the cool part about Didomi is that we let you really configure the vendor list that you want, both like vendors that can be part of the TCF and other type of vendors. We let you really configure new vendors if you ever need them to surface on your CMP. We also let you configure purposes. So if you need for yourself to have custom purposes, it's very easy to configure them and then implement them into your notice. Then if you work with the TCF, we do all the jobs. So you select a vendor and automatically it will pull the exact set of purposes for which you need to collect consent. And then we let you also organize them into stacks. Organize them really the way you want. So for instance, we let you order them the way you like in a fancy drag and drop mode. So it's really cool and really flexible. For publishers that have very custom purposes and also other needs than monetization, we let you also create categories. So it can be like an analytics category that will really regroup all your analytics vendors into a dedicated spot under your notice. Then the rest is just about configuring behavior. So where will your notice be applied, how you will collect consent, managing a bunch of fancy options such as consent capping, not to bother your users too often, and then really applying the integrations that are working for you. So the TCF, but also like other types of integrations. We're integrated, for instance, with all the leading tag management systems out there. So it can be very useful for you to really control whatever tags are then triggered by a consent event. After this is configured, you just need to embed the script on your website in the header section, and that's it. You're live and good to go. We will then provide you with analytics, very rich and detailed analytics, entirely configurable to really measure what is working for you and your consent rates at any time. And that's, in a nutshell, the demo. One thing, and to end up with, Didomi is typically the preferred solutions of developers. So we have a public developer documentation that is really there to show you how deep we can go in terms of consent configuration for you as a publisher. And you don't have to believe me today. You can just go to this website and see by yourself how deep Didomi can help you solve this tricky issue that is consent. That's it for the demo. So thanks a lot for your attention. I'd be happy to take questions right after.
Thanks very much, Romain. And finally, I'll hand over to Gergana Kirovska from LiveRamp. She's head of growth, privacy, and consumer experiences. So Gergana, over to you. You should have the screen.
Yes, thank you. Hopefully everybody can hear me well.
Yep.
Yes, just a moment. I'm having some sharing screen difficulties. Sorry about that.
No worries, take your time.
Let's see. Let's try it now. You should be able to see my screen now.
Yes.
Perfect. Well, first of all, thank you again for inviting us. It's great that the IAB is organizing this. It is definitely difficult to go after two already wonderful CMPs that already walked you through everything in its basis. I will try to make sure that I keep this interesting and focus on giving you some extra information to what was already discussed. Now, having said that, I'm going to be talking about how we from LifeRamp handled IAB TCF 1 and 2 implementation, and how we believe that enables CMPs and publishers. Before I go into that, I think it's important to take a moment to give you an idea of the angle that we have. So why do we do what we do? Everything on the privacy team and privacy experiences team at LifeRamp is coming from ad tech background. So myself, I'm coming from a role where I had to drive innovation in a company like GroupM. We have a number of people coming from the publisher side, and we're very familiar with how the ecosystem works. When we started off, we didn't set out to build a CMP. What we actually wanted to do is we wanted to create an environment where consumers could have more control over their data, and they're brought closer to the online value exchange that is happening. Because we believe that if they're aware of how their data is being used, they're actually going to be much more open to using that value of their data. So we wanted to build a consumer-focused privacy-related identity, which meant we didn't want to treat consumer consent as browser specific or app specific, but identity specific. Now, having said that, that was back in 2018. So the industry wasn't ready for it, the ecosystem wasn't ready for it, and consumers honestly didn't care at that point that much. So we started wondering, okay, what can we do in the meantime in order to help bridge that gap and ensure that the ecosystem can keep functioning while consumers have control over their data. And that's when we actually started working on Privacy Manager. And Privacy Manager is the CMP that I'm going to be discussing today. Now, as we started working on Privacy Manager, we very quickly understood that we believed that IAB TCF was something very essential for us. And we were actually one of the first independent CMPs to implement the TCF. So we're very proudly holding CMP ID number 3, which allowed us to ensure that, yes, first of all, we are IAB TCF verified. Back in V1, we already wanted to have a way to work with custom vendors because we knew there was a need for it. So we were supporting this. And one thing that we actually started building on before we started building any UIs is ensure that every single consent choice preference is saved and auditable, so that if our clients, if the authorities came knocking on the doors of our clients can go directly into our platform and query their own relevant audit trail. So there is a full proof of compliance from the get-go of the product. And last but not least, that's something that Didomi also mentioned earlier, control of tags, that's essential. So having a notice that ensures that consumers can make a choice in an appropriate way, in an IAB TCF verified way, is one thing. Making sure that the signal is passed on to third parties is the second step. But the third step is actually ensuring that no third party is disregarding that signal, that consent preferences by consumers are actually respected. And this is one of the biggest pain points that we saw back in the days when we were working on the first publisher implementations. And this is where we focused a lot of our attention on. This was a highly manual process in the past, but we wanted to automate it in a way that it doesn't create a lot of manual work on the publisher side. Now, having said that, we are very, very happy that the IAB launched the Transparency and Consent Framework because of the following reason. It basically allows us and technologies like ours and what you saw previously, like Oguru and Didomi, to actually focus not so much on figuring out how GDPR should work for different companies, because the IAB is already doing that. IAB has already handled all the legal aspects of what a notice should look like, how purposes should be collected, and streamlined that messaging so that the entire ecosystem can actually speak the same language. Now, because the IAB did this, we could simply ensure that we are able to think of, okay, how can we take this to the next step? And this is what I want to show you today. So when we heard about IAB TCF, V2 coming up, we knew that was coming up. We didn't know how it was going to look like, but the moment that we knew, we took one decision immediately: rebuild. We wanted to rebuild our V1 version in a way that we eliminate any barriers that would allow us to develop everything we want to develop in the future. So we rebuilt our platform from the basics. We did a lot of consumer tests, focus groups, panels. We were constantly in touch with the IAB in order to ensure that everything that we're building is not only in line with TCF policies, but it's also consumer understandable, it's friendly, and it makes sense to the end user regardless of who they are. So with that, we fully support the IAB TCF, and everything that was discussed so far is something that we can offer. But next to that, we actually focused on a couple of additional things. So one of the things that I'm going to show you in a moment is something that we call consent on demand. And I'm going to show you what that looks like in a moment. Configurable tag conditioning. So that's exactly what I mentioned in terms of ensuring that third parties respect the consumer's choice. This used to be a tedious task on the web developer side, making sure that every single tag is conditionally fired. With the solution that we've integrated right now, something that would take an hour work, conditionally tagging, let's say 7 tags, now takes less than a minute. Additionally, the notice that we provide, it allows you to basically set up different notices for countries. So you respect country-specific regulations, and we dynamically show the right notice to your end consumers. So for example, you can say in France, where accept none button is required on the very first screen, you can say, I want to show that in France, but in the UK, when it's required on the second screen, you can actually make those distinctions. And as Didomi also mentioned, we're looking at the space of consent for CTV and OTT. In fact, we're in this time discussing with the IAB if the solution that we're testing with a CTV partner of ours is within the TCF compliance framework. So that's something we're very excited about. Now, having said that, I'm gonna jump into showing you a couple of things. And I'm gonna start with consent on demand and a couple of examples here. So what you see in front of your screen is an example of how the CMP can look like. Everything is, not everything, a lot of this is customizable, especially in terms of look and feel. Even users can choose different languages. But for the purpose of now, what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna deny all. Let's say I'm a consumer, I go to your website and I just deny all, I don't wanna share any data with any third-party vendors. I can always go back to the privacy manager and you would see that all the purposes as well as vendors are switched off. Now, in certain cases, and this is something that publishers haven't, they're really considering, but it's difficult to manage. In certain cases, in order to show certain content, which comes from third parties, whether it's an embedded video or it's a contact form from technologies like Salesforce or HubSpot or Marketo, you actually need specific consent. So what we've done here is we've allowed to do consent on demand. So as a consumer, I can be browsing through the website. I see there is a gap here. Again, this is fully customizable by you. And it basically says, hey, in order to watch this video, data will be collected by Vimeo. You need to agree to that for certain purposes that are listed here. If I consent for Vimeo, the video will become available to me. I can go back to the privacy settings and you would see that we've switched on those specific purposes as well as Vimeo only as a vendor. Now, the interesting thing about this is every single publisher with web developers can build this solution for specific content pieces, but it takes a very long time to build. And instead, we made a templated version of it in our platform. You can see a similar solution here on the LifeRamp website. Again, I'm just going to accept none. And then if I want to get in touch with LifeRamp, I would see that the contact form doesn't appear until I accept to share my data with Marketo. Only then the contact form appears, and I can actually see that Marketo is the only vendor that has been switched on. So this is what we consider consent on demand. Now, if we move to the platform, I'm not going to go into details here. There's plenty of editing opportunities in terms of look and feel and in terms of content. We lock certain content by default because it's a highly self-service platform. Unless our customers need a managed service solution, that's when we guide them through certain changes that they need to make. They can also unlock these features with by making different choices. However, for IAB TCF compliant implementations, we've locked a certain part of the content. Parties, similar, it's very easy to add. You can just choose vendors, whether it's IAB specific or custom vendors. By choosing them, all of the consent purposes, special purposes are already in the list. You have all the publisher controls that you want to in order to add any specific restrictions per vendor and per purpose. And of course, we do full stack support. Now, this is the interesting part. So when we get to triggers, I can easily create a new trigger. And I can say, for example, we have Google Tag Manager. Google Tag Manager is holding our tags. So I want to use the integration with the Google Tag Manager. By adding Google Tag Manager, what's basically going to happen is you would then go to your Google Tag Manager account and you will just say, I want all triggers to listen to LifeRamp Privacy Manager event. Just by doing that, the entire logic of having the right vendor and right purposes firing upon consent is already implemented. There is an additional interesting piece, and that's what we do for hard-coded triggers. So for hard-coded triggers, you have several options. You can do a functional hard-coded trigger or content hard-coded trigger, and this is the content consent on demand part. So if you have a hard-coded trigger, you can just put your hard code over here. We give you a code which you replace your code with, and that's already a placeholder for the consent on demand part. In the consent on demand configuration, you can basically use different templates that we've created, for example, for YouTube or Facebook or Instagram or technologies like Salesforce, Marketo, and etc. Or you can actually build your own placeholder in the way that you need it in order to ensure best communication with your consumer. Now, having said this, I believe that this allows you to have to provide your consumers with meaningful experiences that are more privacy centric on top of everything that is already available. I do want to underline, none of this, we wouldn't be able to focus on any of this as advanced technologies if the IAB TCF didn't lay the groundwork, the difficult work of handling all the policy and notice requirements and advice. Thank you very much for your time, and I would love to take questions.
Thank you, Gergana. Thanks very much for all three presentations. I'll jump straight into the questions. We have about 5 minutes left, perhaps a couple of more if we go a bit over the hour. So we have some questions coming in. You might see some have already been answered in writing here in the questions box. But I'll start here with the first one on the top. The question is, does the CMP validator also exist for apps, or is it only for web? So maybe Patrick, I would nominate you to answer that one. I believe it's only for web currently as a Chrome extension.
Yes, that's correct. It's a Chrome extension, so unfortunately that means it only works in Chrome on the desktop. So for the validation process for non-web CMPs, we have a Google form with all the different policy checks, and we ask that the CMP submit a screenshot for each of the policy checks so that we can actually go through the process of validation.
That's right. The requirements remain exactly the same, however. Okay, thank you, Patrick. Also, I think there's a question asking about a community for reporting CMP issues, and how can we be part of that group? I'm not sure if that question concerns about is about developer issues. So I had answered a previous question about this. There is a Slack channel. So once you're TCF, once you're part of the TCF community, we can get access to that Slack channel where you can share issues, and the developer community can help you out with any of those. So moving on that one, Katarzyna is asking a question about the correlation between purposes, the purposes layer and the partners layer. So if the user objects to some purposes on the purpose layer, should those objections be reflected also on the partners layer? And then a second question, is saving the consent string and users' privacy preferences treated as a necessary cookie that doesn't require consent? So maybe I'll start with Patrick. Would you like to take the first part of this?
Okay, so if I understand the question, we're talking about a user objecting to legitimate interest for purposes, and what should the reflection be for the vendors in the user interface. So within the user interface, you would need to have the toggle or whatever user interface component there is for the purpose set to off for a particular objection to legitimate interest. And in doing so, when you look at the vendors in the user interface, you do not need to actually reflect that legitimate interest objection level. And that's because the signals in the TC string are separate for the purposes and for the vendors. So there are signals for consent of the purposes in the string and for legitimate interest purposes in the string. And then there are signals for consent for the vendors in the string and legitimate interest for the vendors in the string. And so if the user has objected to a purpose overall for legitimate interest, then when the vendors process the TC string, they need to look at the purpose first. If they do not have a legal basis, then even if their signal in the string is positive, they cannot proceed to process personal data. So hopefully that answers the question. In the user interface, you do not need to reflect that on the vendor side. And as far as the actual TC string cookie is concerned, I do believe that qualifies as a necessary cookie. Philip, correct me if I'm wrong.
That's right. Thanks, Patrick. That's absolutely correct. So maybe now a question quickly to our speakers. I think this one has also been in part answered in the question box. The question is, as a publisher, can I remove vendors from the vendor list because there's no need to use consent for selected country, or does the validated TCF CMP need to be used as approved by IAB? So I guess this is about a publisher implementing vendor controls. So maybe very quickly, Romain, do you want to start with vendor controls and how you implement those at Didomi?
Sure. So at Didomi, our clients have full control over their vendor list, so they can select any subset of the IAB list, as well as add other vendors that are outside the IAB. Of course, then they will surface in the vendor list as distinguished, so that there is a clear like a logo that indicates that a vendor belongs to the IAB TCF. But there is full control over the nature of the list of vendors, which will be surfaced in the consent notice. Then on top of that, we apply all the publisher restrictions that are allowed by the TCF. That gives a lot of power to publishers to effectively choose for which vendors will use which legal basis, and to ensure that it fits as a publisher your own policies.
Perfect. Thank you, Romain. Actually, I have just one last question that maybe we can have Nandia and Gagana, or Nandia, Robin, or Gagana also cover. From your perspective, I think it's relevant for everybody to know, how long does the transition from V1 to V2 take in order to transition from a V1 CMP to a V2 CMP, considering your implementations?
Right. Well, I hope Nandi doesn't mind. I'm gonna start
Go
here.
ahead. You have 32 seconds
Sure.
to 34 seconds.
First of all, it really depends on the publisher themselves. The hard work is already done in terms of figuring out who their vendors are. So the moment that you have figured that out, actually setting up the CMP and making sure that it works correctly is not that hard. The hard part is figuring out which part of the publisher controls you do want to use and take advantage of. With our platform, we've seen implementations of V2 happen within 2 days. However, average, it's, I would say, about 2 weeks to do the actual implementation in a correct way.
Thank you, Gagana. Nandi or Robin, any views? Okay, Nandi or Robin, I don't know if you're still with us. Perhaps Romain, if you want to complete that, sure, go ahead.
I think it very much depends on if you're getting started with the TCF, so meaning that you don't have any live V1 implementation on your websites, then effectively it's pretty easy and your CMP can really help you make it very fast. Then if you are a large publisher with not one website, but a number of websites, obviously it takes a bit more time. I agree with Gagania that the most difficult part is figuring out what like governance you want to establish as a publisher upon your vendors with respect to a number of controls you have available. And when that is figured out, so together with your data protection officers and your privacy team, then the actual configuration within the CMP is not that difficult. And it's just a matter of days. What can take a bit more time is the deployment and implementation of the CMP to get it right. So meaning that to effectively control which tags will be triggered by the CMP when. That can take a bit of time depending on how many websites or mobile applications you have. For apps specifically, the release cycles are a bit longer, and so you really need to take a bit more time than for the web parts.
Yeah, sorry guys, Robin speaking for Augury. I was mute and couldn't remove. So yeah, I would say we have exactly the same answer. So on app, it's pretty basic, goes pretty fast, and the key question is integration with the third-party vendors, but mostly with the ones that are not part of the IAB framework. And on apps, it just takes a bit more time because for sure you have an SDK integration. So usually you pack it, you have like a test review and stuff like this. But for sure, when we start working with publishers, we have a planning and we share like milestones, and usually it's pretty smooth if we check what we've seen so far.
Okay, thanks very much. I'm afraid we're out of time. What I would like to note is, Helen, if you could just move to the last slide, please. So if you have any questions about any policy questions, any technical questions, I can see there are still a few remaining in the question box here. Please don't hesitate to contact us. This session has been recorded and you have all the contact information for IAB. And also please don't hesitate to contact, of course, I assume our speakers if you have any questions for them. So see you at our next webinar, and thanks very much for joining, and have a nice afternoon or evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.